Hello guys, and welcome back to your second tutorial in MATLAB. Today we're going to go over, creating variables and putting values in variables and etc. etc. But yeah, for those of you not familiar with programming, we're only going to go over three types of variables. One for storing numbers, another one for storing these things called strings, which are just strings of letters forming sentences or words or paragraphs, what have you. And then we'll finish up with talking about, storing values, storing multiple numbers in a single variable. Right now we'll just call them arrays. For those of you that are math savvy, which I guess a lot of you probably are considering you're learning how to use MATLAB, you can refer to it as a vector, I suppose. But the first thing we need to do is pull up a window that's not really on the screen at the moment, and that is called the workspace window. And I just realized that it doesn't start up initially with this version of MATLAB. It does in an older one I had for some reason, but I don't know why I didn't this time. So go into your desktop pull-down menu and turn on Workspace. And now we have another window, as you can see, that just popped up over here where the mouse is. And we'll see why we need this here in a minute. Or not really so much need it right now, but we will. Trust me. So, why don't we start by creating a variable? It's basically a variable is referring to something with a name, something that we can recall later. Like, let's say, for example, my boss's name is Bob. So let's create a variable named Bob, B-O-B. And we'll set Bob equal to 7 because it's my lucky number. So there we go. Press enter. You see here that we have Bob equals 7 in the command window. But also over here on this workspace window that we just pulled in, we have Bob and we have the value 7. And if we scroll over, we can see a min and a max, which doesn't really have any significance at the moment considering we only have one number. But yeah, that's pretty much storing a value in a variable. And now we can say create another variable. We'll call it Bob2 and maybe put the value 3 in it. And we can use these variable names in place of numbers. So say that we wanted to add Bob and Bob2, we should probably get 10, I guess. So let's see what happens. Bob plus Bob2, bam, we got 10. Wow, that's amazing. Anyways, another thing to point out here is if we look over on this side, we have Bob, Bob2, but we also have this variable called ands, which that happens to be the value currently or last used by MATLAB. So if you, let's say, try to figure out what 4 divided by 2 is, for example, the value of it changes. So the last value that MATLAB computed will appear in this special ands variable, and it always is updated for every new value you have. But in any case, that's creating a variable and doing different things with variables. We can subtract them from one another, for example, or we can multiply them. That would be a Bob. So if I did Bob times Bob, that's basically Bob squared. So if I wanted to do Bob raised to the 2, I should get the same thing. But anyways, that's pretty much all we need to do with numbers, I guess, right now. So there's another type of variable called a string in MATLAB, and I don't use them very often, and I'm sure there's a good reason to use strings, but I haven't really come across many of them. But if, let's say, we wanted to store a sentence in a variable, and this time we'll call it, I don't know, tuna, and we could set it equal to a string, so a sentence. But in order to do this, we have to surround our sentence with a single quotation, like so. tuna fish is yummy, I guess. I don't know. But we just stored a sentence inside a variable and gave it a name. Now if we type in that word again for the variable, tuna, press enter, it'll tell us what we have stored in that particular variable name. And it's a string. Tuna fish is yummy, I guess. You know, that's my opinion. But anyways, yeah, that's pretty much a string, a brief, quick introduction. And finally, we should cover at last a series of numbers stored in a variable. Let's say we want to create a variable and store the numbers 1 through 3 in it. And we can call the variable numbers because it has many numbers in it. What we do is we create the variable name, and we have these brackets we put in here. And what we do is we separate each number by a comma. So 1, 2, 3, closing the bracket, press enter, bam, we have numbers equals 1, 2, 3. So if I type in numbers again, it'll give me all the numbers in numbers. Or we can go and reference an individual value inside of numbers. Some programming languages start with a reference of 0. MATLAB likes to start with 1. I don't know why. They just do. So let's say we wanted to pull out the number 2, which is the middle number here. In that case, we reference it not with closing brackets, or not with brackets, but with parentheses now. So if we wanted to pull out 2 and we wanted to get the second number, we have numbers parentheses 2, we get our 2. Or there's also, we're going to be probably using this quite a bit, there's another way to just show all the numbers other than just typing in the whole variable name itself. That would be numbers parentheses colon. So now we have a colon. Now colon means just pull out everything in that variable. So if it's a whole bunch of numbers, a whole bunch of something else in this variable, it'll just list everything. So we have 1, 2, and 3, and it looks like it's up and down for some reason. That I don't know why, but we'll learn how to change that and manipulate it later. So lastly, as you can see, all our variables showed up here in the workspace. You can see them on the left hand side. If we wanted to save all these values and bring them back later, we can actually call a function to do that. So why don't we try that? We can do function save, and the file we want to save it as, and again, if we save it in a file, it's going to save it in the current working directory that we have over here in the current folder, and we're still in the MATLAB folder. So we'll create a file and call it our variables, I guess, and close the parentheses, press enter. So you can see a new file over here started up, and it has a .mat extension. Now a command we could type in to get rid of all the variables and clear everything is clear. So all the variables are gone now. We don't have any of the variables we created before. So if I type in Bob undefined, Bob2 undefined, numbers, big surprise, undefined. But if we want to bring them back, since we saved them and we're smart about it, I guess, we could just load space our variables, because that's the name of our file, and we can either type in the .mat or not. So if we don't type in the .mat, it'll still pull them in. It doesn't matter. Do it either way. In fact, there's other ways to save and load files with your variables in them, and I'll get to those later. But for now, this is pretty much it for talking about a brief introduction to variables. Well, I hope you enjoyed your second tutorial on MATLAB. This pretty much concludes variables with numbers, strings, and a series of numbers. Perhaps in the next tutorial we'll talk a little bit more about variables and go into something else. But that's pretty much it for now, so sit back and relax and enjoy what you learned, I guess. If you didn't learn anything, I'm sorry, but what are you going to do? Alright, see you in the next one. Bye-bye.